Okay, thank you everybody for coming, and thank you to Martin Chautari for inviting us to present what's really work in progress. So Shyam and I are quite looking forward to the discussion after the presentation, because we're still writing the work in question, and so your thoughts and suggestions and reactions will be really, really useful for us. The experiments with visual storytelling that's in the title is a graphic novel, and in a minute I'll explain a bit more about what is meant by graphic novel. The graphic novel book that we're producing is asking what's at stake when development investment in rural mountains concentrates in large transportation infrastructure. We're thinking about the incredible road building activity that is so evident all across the hill area of Nepal. And what we're doing is looking into the history and people's experiences, the stories that they tell on one stretch of road, okay? So, oops, am I working?
Next one.
Next one, okay. So this is the structure of the talk today. First, I'm going to talk about the concept behind this project, which is talking about the visual storytelling format that we're using. And then the second part of the talk will really be looking a little bit at the collaboration that's involved in doing this, because we're working with a team of researchers and also a team of visual artists, and both halves are necessary to making this happen. Then the last part of our presentation will be about the subject matter and the content of this graphic novel, and then there'll be lots of time, I hope, for a discussion, and as I said, we're really interested in your feedback on this. So this is the provisional title of the book that we're producing. So I'm interested in your opinions about the title. It's provisional at this point. And down there in the bottom, you see we've completed one sample chapter. So this is an example of the look that we're looking to. Okay, so the project has a scholarly content in terms of information and perspectives that it conveys, but it's also an experiment in the mediums that we use to express our research. And so it's an experiment in alternative forms for communicating the kinds of things that we learn as researchers. Shyam and I are anthropologists. We work ethnographically. A lot of you are anthropologists, and you also work ethnographically. So really for us, it's a project about how to take that ethnographic sensibility and way of seeing and do it and express it in a different format. So people are generally, when we think of alternative forms of scholarly communication, most commonly you see documentary films or photo essays. Some people have done things with art exhibitions or museum exhibitions. Some people do things with sound. Podcasts are becoming very popular, and so some interesting documentary work is being done through sound. The kind of alternative that we're experimenting with here has to do with drawing and with visual communication through hand-drawn art. So, as I mentioned, this is a big collaborative project. It's my baby in the sense that I became very inspired by this idea of conveying anthropology through graphic narrative. But there's no way I could produce or write this book on my own. So the way that this big team project is working is that there's a group of researchers. I'm working most closely with Shyam and also Shanta Thapa. Tulasi Sigdel and Lagan Rai are involved as well as the researchers who are doing the primary ethnographic research for a project called Infrastructures of Democracy. And that's a project that is led by Dr. Catherine Rankin, a geographer at University of Toronto, and co-led by Dr. Sarah Schneiderman, who's an anthropologist at University of British Columbia. So they have been doing this project. I mean, it's a big team research project with 3 districts and a lot of objectives. And I proposed to the principal investigators that their research would make an interesting graphic novel. So the graphic novel is kind of a spin-off from their research work. So that's where the information base and the understanding of roads and road politics is coming from. To execute this as a kind of visual story, we're also incorporating a team of visual artists and illustrators. So Pramina Shrestha is here. She's the creative director. And just in time, Kanchan Gurung Rajbandari is one of the illustrators, and are the other people coming? No? Okay. Srijit Rajbandari and Shushank Shrestha. So the 3 of them are doing the actual illustration work. So you'll see in some of the future slides, it has underneath Bato Gato Art Team, because the talents of the visual artists are being combined to produce the work that you'll see. So our idea with this book is to publish it in both English in North America and, I hope, in Nepali with a Nepali publisher here. So there would be 2 editions, and one would not necessarily be a literal translation of the other. Like, we keep in mind sort of the different audiences. And believe it or not, there are university presses now who are publishing what are basically comic books for academic artists. So this is kind of a new thing that's starting to happen. Oops. So to put the experiment in a big picture context, you know, we're all scholars and we've all been trained to favor written work. Like, reading and writing is the way that we communicate, the way that we handle information, the way that we record our research notes, and also the primary way that we express our findings out to the world. And as trained scholars, we also favor a rhetorical form that is argument, right? You have to have an argument to your paper. You have to offer an interpretation of your evidence. You have to assert that things are a certain way in the world, or that we need to understand them in a certain way. So those are the conventions of the rhetoric of scholarly communication. But we're seeing increased interest in research artist collaborations of various kinds. And when those are true collaborations, it does require a shift in what has primacy in scholarly communication. And these kind of artist-researcher collaborations open up different kinds of expressive possibilities. There's also a lot of new work in arts-based methodologies, that is, using the production of artistic practices as a way of generating insight. And also, arts-based methodologies can be used for forms of participatory research. Now, the interesting thing that happens when you build arts-based understandings to traditional academic scholarship is that you often uncover new insights or knowledge that you wouldn't have uncovered like through a traditional form like interviews. So how do I want to say this? We're working to produce a particular literary work that we're going to talk about. But behind that, for both of us as anthropologists, there's the question of what happens with scholarly communication if we broaden the types of mediums that we use. Now, obviously, one of the first things that you can think about is just simple accessibility, that a film or photographs or drawings are easier for a broader range of people to understand, or at least they feel more friendly and understandable than the kinds of thick academic prose that we write. So there's the question of accessibility and appeal, but I would say that we have to think a little bit beyond that, like not just like popularization of our understandings or our knowledge, but really to think about it in terms of who are the audiences or who are the constituencies that we're inviting into the kinds of conversations that scholars have among themselves. It can be a way of expanding who we think of as part of the conversation and not just receivers of the conversation or the analyses that we produce. So that's one interesting possibility. Then we have to ask that if the mediums that we're using to communicate change our sense of audience, then when our sense of audience or interlocutors, who's part of the community that we're talking to, when that changes, does that also shift what we think we need to say? That raises a lot of questions about, like the politics of the academic research we do. And then there's a third question too, which is whether or how new mediums influence what we notice in the first place and what we start wondering and thinking about as scholars. That is, we can move the question back from popularization to inclusion, but even thinking that arts-based work, whether it's at the research methodology end or the communication end, could actually inspire new knowledge and scholarship, like shift what it is that we're thinking about and understanding. So for me in the long term, the project, the graphic novel that we're working on is a great labor of love for me. I'm very invested in the product, but I'm also learning so much through the process of doing it, and I expect to be sort of writing in the future and thinking in the future about these kinds of questions. Okay, so this is the content section of the talk, and I'm going to go through these slides really quickly. They're on the handout that's gone around. So what do I mean by a graphic novel? A graphic novel is basically a long comic book. And what's a comic book? It contains comics, and what are comics? Comics are a medium for expressing information or ideas, and this medium has certain characteristics. It's visual images used in sequence to provide a storyline. So an alternative term for comics, graphic novels, is sequential storytelling, because it's the way that the images and the words work together and the kind of sequence that they're placed in that is the essence of the medium. So comics also, as you recognize, the convention of word balloons and thought balloons are almost always, but not always, included. And then the convention of using the box, the panel border, to separate out the images and link them together. Those are the building blocks, you know? It's very simple, but people do amazingly interesting kinds of things by combining these simple elements that can be incredibly impactful. So the main point here is that comics is a medium. It's not what you call a genre. So if you associate comics with like Batman, Superman, superheroes, outer space characters, science fiction, I personally happen to be a fan of those genres, but you can tell other kinds of stories through the medium of comics. It's a medium like photography is. You can put any sort of idea in it. So the idea of like serious topic graphic novels, most people would call this book sort of the first one that sort of laid the groundwork. And this is a book called Mouse by Art Spiegelman. And in it, he tells his father's story of the World War II Holocaust and being in a concentration camp. It's very gritty, it's very violent, it's very intense, but he does it by representing the Nazis as cats and the Jews as mice. So there's an imaginative element to a memoir, basically. Now, another one that many people have heard of is this book Persepolis, which is the artist Mariani Satrapi's memoir of being a child during the revolution in Iran and her family's subsequent departure from Iran. You can see very different art style here. I could give you a list of like 20 or 30 or 40 nonfiction, serious, like academic inspired ones. This one has been a bestseller in the United States. It comes in several volumes. It's called March. It's based on the life story of Congressman John Lewis, who was a leader in the US civil rights movement. So it uses his personal story to give a political history of that movement. Now, another author who's very well known is Eda Leo. He is an animator and a cartoonist who happens to be married to somebody who works for international INGOs. And so following his wife around the world, he has written a number of different, it's hard to know what to call them. They're not exactly memoirs, but sort of almost like perceptive travel logs that are very observant and really capture some element of the expatriate experience and the history of these different places. Now, as you can see, he uses a very, very simple art style to do this. It's very spare, but it's incredibly effective. So this is an example. The book Abina and the Important Man was published by Oxford University Press. They actually have a book series of graphic novels to be used in university history classrooms. And so this was the first one that they published. It was based on documents that a historian found doing research on the early British colonial period in Ghana. So we're starting to see more and more academic researchers turn their work into graphic novels. Oops, wrong direction. More common, though, is something that's come to be called graphic journalism, which is a form that was pretty much single-handedly invented by this author, Joe Sacco. And Footnotes in Gaza is he goes around to different conflict zones. He interviews people. In this one, he's learning about history. He depicts himself interviewing people. So from an anthropological perspective, there's a lot of reflexivity and self-consciousness about the methods in it. Now, the illustrations from this book, I stole off the internet, so they're horribly pixelated, and my own copy of the book is at home in Canada, and I couldn't, get scanned in time for this. But you can kind of see, like, one characteristic of his work is showing sort of the landscape, the bombed out sort of Gaza Strip, the military presence, brutality. He interviewed people. These are their memories of violent massacres that they went through, and then you can see the fantasy element in the way that he's depicted it. And he'll often represent different people that he's talked to, render their faces very realistic, and a quote from them. So that gives you a sense of some of the kinds of one style of graphic journalism. And if you're interested in this, a place to look is positivenegatives.org. It's an organization based in London, does true stories drawn from life. Many of their things have been published in the Guardian newspaper in Britain, and right now they're doing a big series of, they interview migrants to Europe and represent their stories in comic format. Okay. So that was a crash course in graphic novels. So the next question is, what potential does this format have? Okay, and we can all go to the truism, the pictures with 1,000 words, and also the power of the visual and the incredible sort of appeal that visual communication has for human beings. There's a vast academic literature in literary studies about the medium of comics and how different writer-artists have used them. So that world of stuff exists there. I want to bring it down to sort of a simple concept, which is this concept of affordances. So my question is, what are the affordances of the comics format? And an affordance is, here are two definitions of it. What a thing makes possible. Usually we talk about it in terms of like the built environment or tools and things, but you can also talk about the affordances of a medium. So the first and foremost one in the comics medium is this thing that we call closure. Okay, and so what you see here are 3 different panels. So like if you can imagine not seeing this and you just see this guy's face, or you just see the gun pointed to his head, or you just see the grave, individually you could imagine many things behind those stories. But when we rearrange them, when we put it in this order, your mind automatically tries to make a story that relates those 3 images together. Nobody is telling you how these things actually go together. You have to come up with it in yourself. So the place where comics actually place their meaning is not in the panel itself, but in the space between the panels, okay? And that is the challenge of producing work in this format, but it's also one of the really artistically and expressively fun things to play with. So closure is one of the primary ways that comics do what they do. Now, another thing that I find as an anthropologist quite interesting about this medium is its emphasis on voice, which comes through the speech balloons, and also, for instance, here, that you can convey the shouting, right? And also perspective in the sense of like, what's the viewpoint that you're having, or whose viewpoint are you taking? Like where are you as the viewer located in the frame? So, yeah, if you're an anthropologist, voice and perspective, that's what we're all about, right? And then another thing that lots of literary scholars have written about in comics is the embodiment and the sensory quality that's communicated through the pictures. So even though the medium itself is visual, it should, when I took a course on how to make comics, because I tried to learn how to do this myself, even though I don't actually really draw at all or very well. One of the things that the teacher told us is that whenever you imagine a scene that you're going to draw, you should be imagining what it smells like, what it feels like, what it sounds like, and that enters into the picture. And because we're looking at bodies in environments, we're going to tend to empathize or get that sort of imagine ourselves in the same situation. So that's one of the affordances of comics as well. And these things can all come together in very interesting ways to communicate power relations. And the lived experience of these power relations, I think, comes across more strongly in this medium than in anything I could write as an ethnographer. So like for me, the thing that I'm hoping in this work, like at a deep level, my very ambitious goal is to be able to communicate the kind of implosion of technocratic development planning ideals about roads infrastructure and the reality on the ground and different kinds of people's everyday lived experience. And what you're looking at here is one of the amazing pieces in the sample chapter that we did that our artists, our artists have produced. Okay, collaboration. So the way that I've done this is I am not a road researcher. I am a parasite on the actual road researchers project because I have done research in Nepal. I've lived in the mountains. I've always been interested in roads. I know something about how development has worked in Nepal. I have a memory of what some Middle Hill districts were like 35 years ago. I feel that like I'm able to be a pretty quick study on this stuff, but actually it's the team of the researchers who have the in-depth knowledge. So the way that we've been working on producing the script is that I'm the interlocutor for Shyam, who talks me basically his field notes. So we do like these conversations where he tells me things that he's observed, he describes it, he describes things that people said, he tells me what he thinks is important about it. I look at documents, I read the literature, I look at development reports, I look through photographs, and I sit for weeks and weeks and weeks and kind of digest it and then sort of come up with a proposal for a storyline. And one of the things that we've learned, interestingly, in doing this is the huge difference between writing your field notes and, like you think that you're doing thick description. You think you're doing the thickest thick description. But memory and what's in your field notes is really different. And so when Shyam describes the things, the verbal descriptions contain so much more than the original field notes or the notes in his notebook contain. And I think it's partly because like talking to another human being versus writing on a piece of paper elicits a really different sort of sense of the place. We do that, but then we discover that when it comes to actually drawing that scene, how many other extra things need to be known. So we've come to see this project as very much being sensory ethnography, and that both of us, like I've always been a very verbally oriented ethnographer. I tend to pay more attention to discourse and the style that people use to speak. And working on this project has really shifted me to paying more attention to everyday kinds of things. Malinowski, back in 1922, talked about it as the imponderabilia of daily life, and boy, are we ever pondering the imponderabilia when we do this, that's for sure. So I realize how much we gloss over, academic description allows us to gloss over details. And so in constructing this script, which is based on true stories but semi-fictionalized, we are doing a lot of thinking like, would this kind of person actually say this kind of thing? What does a consulting engineer look like? We've recently spent a lot of time discussing whether a journalist would have a beard or not. Okay, what kinds of clothes did people wear in 1980 or in 1975 in this location? And you can't script and you can't draw without having those details. So the amount of visual research and field trips and archival investigation we're doing is far more than I expected we'd be. And one of the things that our objective is to communicate the feel of places. And the last part of what we're trying to do that we think we can do with the graphic narrative is keep, the comic stories can be open-ended. They don't have to produce an argument. They don't have to tell the reader, this is the way that you must understand this situation. So we're interested in all the ways that we can create ambiguity and capture the way that people's experiences of roads can be positive and negative, or be both positive and negative. So quickly, we're not gonna go into a lot of detail about this story, but after a year's worth of thinking and discussion, we have 4 characters who are thrown together in a Jeep ride, and they're going to be taking a Jeep from the Upper Tamakoshi hydropower project to Charikot. But naturally, things happen on the way. There's a landslide, there's stops, there's like stuff that happens. So we've come up with these 4 characters who will each be seeing the kinds of events that they encounter in slightly different ways. Okay, other part of the collaboration is the artists. And the artists are intellectual co-creators in this project. And certainly I myself naively thought a few years ago that artists are good at drawing and they execute things. And I have since learned how much incredible intellectual, conceptual, and analytical labor goes into doing what they do. So what you're seeing here is a preliminary page of script, and the first thoughts that the artists are going through about brainstorming about different ways to block it. You know, like these kinds of scribbles basically only make sense to the person who scribbled them. But we're talking very intensely about this, and you know, like you have to work through several options before you get a good layout. So you can see that in organizing this project, I prioritized hiring Nepali illustrators. You know, I could have tried to hire somebody from my home, and brought them over to Nepal. But I think that I hope that there's something about the creating a story about something that's very very central to Nepali society today through people who are immersed in this environment, and their sort of sense will make a difference. And that's not to say that anybody who has Nepali citizenship or residence here has, you know, unlimited ability to represent anyone's life in Nepal. But it's certainly better than bringing an American artist and having them be like, wow, there are cows in the street in Kathmandu, and having to like overcome that before we can even get to the Upper Tamakoshi hydropower project. So we're using landscape imagery really extensively, and we've settled on kind of a realistic aesthetic style. And for a number of parts of the book, like the actual representation of actual places along the road is going to be really central. So the last point is that comics especially require forms of simplification. It's all about what you leave out, okay? And I know my temptation as an ethnographer is to try to like put everything in and have it as rich as possible, but we know that the real meaning is going to come from selecting the right details and framing them in the right way. So right now we're in the midst of combing through a lot of reference photos to look for these sort of little tiny common things that sort of speak to the experience of roads. And this is where I turn it over to Shyam, who's going to talk about the content and the message a little bit, and then we'll move into discussion.
Thank you. Stacy, अब म चाहिँ नेपालीमा गर्छु. स्टेसीले अब यो ग्राफिक नोभल के हो भनेर बोलिसक्नु भयो, तर यसको पछाडि हाम्रो थुप्रै कामहरू पनि छ. त्यसकारण कन्टेन्ट चाहिँ मेरो लागि इम्पोर्टेन्ट पनि हो. हामीले चाहिँ खास चाहिँ यो एउटा लोकेसन दोलखामा हामीले लोकेसन गरेको 68 किलोमिटरको रोड हो. खास चाहिँ यसको हिस्ट्री भन्यो भने यो प्लान चाहिँ पञ्चायत कालमा भयो, तर यसको राम्रो एक्जिक्युसन चाहिँ अप्पर तामाकोसी मात्रै कम्प्लिट भयो हैन. त्यसको पछाडि चाहिँ थुप्रै यसको आफ्नो रोड कसरी बन्छ भन्ने पछाडि कथाहरू चाहिँ थुप्रै छ. त्यसकारण हामीले टर्म चाहिँ के युज गरेका छौँ भने रोड पोलिटिक्स भन्ने कुरा गरेका छौँ. अब खास गरेर चाहिँ नेपालको सन्दर्भमा सडकलाई चाहिँ एउटा विकासको मुख्य पूर्वाधारको रूपमा लिइन्छ र अब अहिले पनि हामीले दैनिक न्युज पेपरहरू हेऱ्यौँ भने सरकारको पनि एकदम प्रायोरिटीको सेक्टर रोड हैन. त्यो पनि यस्तो इमेजिनेसन छ कि इकोनोमिक डेभलपमेन्टको चाहिँ नर्थ साउथ कोरिडोर बन्यो भने त नेपाल त लाइक हैन ह्युज इकोनोमिक बेनिफिट्स एन्ड डेभलपमेन्ट. त्यो खालको एउटा कमन न्यारेटिभ सँगसँगै ग्रासरुट लेभलमा गयो भने पिपुल आर डिमान्डिङ रोड्स है. अब त्यो खालको कन्टेक्स्टलाई चाहिँ हामीले कसरी अब एथनोग्राफिकली स्टडी गर्ने भनेर इन्फ्रास्ट्रक्चर डेमोक्रेसीमा हामीले गरिरहेको, तर योलाई चाहिँ कसरी हामीले ग्राफिक नोभलमा पनि त्यो कुरालाई हामी प्रेजेन्ट गर्न सक्छौँ भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ स्टेसीको मेन आइडियामा हामीले चाहिँ गरेको कामलाई चाहिँ अलिकति प्रेजेन्ट गर्नलाई सो कन्टेन्टहरू के हुने भन्ने विषयमा थोरै डिस्कस गर्न चाहन्छु. अब हाम्रो खास ब्याकग्राउन्ड चाहिँ एज एन एन्थ्रोपोलोजिस्ट मेरो पनि र सोसियल साइन्टिस्टहरूले चाहिँ अहिले जुन पछिल्लोचोटि भइरहेको इन्फ्रास्ट्रक्चरमा जुन खालको स्टडिजहरू एक खालको फ्लप भइरहेछ हैन. अब एक हिसाबले धेरैले इन्फ्रास्ट्रक्चर टर्न भनेर पनि एकाडेमिकली डिस्कस गरिरहेछन्, तर यो कुरालाई चाहिँ हामी कमनली कसरी सेयर गर्न सक्छौँ एथनोग्राफिकली भन्ने चाहिँ हाम्रो एउटा आइडिया चाहिँ एग्रिमेन्ट भएर यसको कन्टेन्टमा हामी गयौँ. यहाँ चाहिँ हामीले खास चाहिँ यसको यो मेन थिम इलस्ट्रेसन गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ यो रोड पोलिटिक्स चाहिँ यो कहाँबाट सुरु हुन्छ भन्दा रोड इमेजिनेसनबाट सुरु हुन्छ र यो अलवेज केसँग चाहिँ आउँछ भन्दा रोड पोलिटिक्ससँग इमेजिनेसन जोडेर आउँछ. यसलाई हामीले कसरी क्याटेगोराइज गर्ने भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ यसको ब्याकग्राउन्ड चाहिँ हामीले 3वटा एरियामा पोलिटिक्सलाई हेर्न सकिन्छ भनेर भनेको छ यो रोडको कन्टेक्स्टमा. एउटा चाहिँ जियो पोलिटिकल क्यापिटलिजम, खास चाहिँ नेपाल चाहिँ चाइना र इन्डियाको जाइन्ट इकोनोमिक कन्ट्रिजहरूको बिचमा, र हामीले पोसिबल कहाँ देखिरहेछौँ कि इमेजिन गरिरहेछौँ भने नर्थ साउथ कोरिडोर भयो भने चाहिँ नेपाल चाहिँ एउटा त्यस्तो ठाउँ हुन्छ जो तपाईँले नसोचेको विकास हुन्छ भन्ने एउटा खालको स्टेटको डोनरको एउटा खालको पोलिसी छ. त्यही सँगसँगै फेरि यतातिर एकाडेमिकल्ली चाहिँ क्रिटिकल डेभलपमेन्ट स्टडिजहरू खास गरेर एन्थ्रोपोलोजी एन्ड अदर सोसियल साइन्टिस्टले चाहिँ पिकअप के गरिरहेछन् भने त्यसको इम्प्याक्ट चाहिँ कस्तो हुनसक्छ भन्दाखेरि एउटा खालको भनौँ न इम्प्याक्टले चाहिँ अब नेपालको कन्टेक्स्टमा चाहिँ अलिक पुरानो हेऱ्यो भने अब डेभिड सेरेनहरूको स्टडी नेपालको क्राइसिस होइन कसरी डिपेन्डेन्सी क्रिएट गर्छ, कसरी यो रोडले होइन र कसरी यसले चाहिँ भनौँ न भिलेजेसको जुन खालको सब्सटेन्स इकोनोमीलाई फ्रजाइल बनाइरहेछ भन्ने तर्कहरू पनि आउँछ. र अहिले पछिल्लोसम्म पनि अब डिबेटहरू चाहिँ भइरहेको छ, मिडिया पनि आउँछ. तर त्यसको पछाडि चाहिँ खास साँच्चीकै त्यो रोड अब यति राम्रो इकोनोमिक प्रस्पेरिटी सँगसँगै फेरि त्यसको क्रिटिक सँगसँगै यसको पछाडि यो कसरी बन्छ सडक भन्ने कथा चाहिँ यसको मेन कन्टेन्टहरू हुन्छ भनेर हामीले सोचेका छौँ. र त्यसमा चाहिँ अघि मैले भनेको 3 एरियामा एउटा चाहिँ जियो पोलिटिकल क्यापिटलिजम कसरी प्रेजेन्ट गर्ने, नेक्स्ट चाहिँ नेसनल पोलिसिजहरू जसले चाहिँ अब रोडलाई कसरी यसले इकोनोमिक प्रस्पेरिटी ल्याउँछ अथवा यसले अथवा अर्को चाहिँ इन्क्रिजिङ इनइक्वालिटी पनि त्यही सँगसँगै आउँछ र यसले कसरी मार्जिनलाइज पनि गर्छ भनेर दुवै खालको स्टडिजहरूलाई हेर्दाखेरि चाहिँ त्यो ओभरअल यो कसरी यो नेसनल पोलिसीमा डिरेक्ट गरिरहेछ सडक निर्माण अथवा इन्फ्रास्ट्रक्चर ट्रान्सपोर्टेसन इन्फ्रास्ट्रक्चर बिल्डिङ कसरी भइरहेछ भन्ने कुरालाई चाहिँ त्यो बिच भएको एक खालको कन्ट्रडिक्सनलाई पनि हामी त्यसलाई रोड पोलिटिक्सको एउटा एरियामा हेर्छौँ भने अर्को चाहिँ लोकल लेभलमा खास गरेर ग्रासरुट लेभलमा चाहिँ जाँदाखेरि कसरी त्यो सडक निर्माणमा को एक्टरहरू इन्भल्भ हुन्छ को हो त्यो साँच्चीकै त्यसलाई बनाउने र त्यो बनाउँदाखेरिका पछाडिका स्टोरिजहरू चाहिँ भन्दाखेरि नर्मल्ली मेरो एक्सपिरियन्सको कुरा पनि सडक आयो भने के हुन्छ अथवा त्यसको एडभान्टेज र डिसएडभान्टेजको कुरा गर्दाखेरि मान्छेले सडक त चाहिन्छ भन्ने कुरा गर्छ। जब तपाईँ ग्रासरुट लेभलमा साँच्चीकै सडक बन्न थाल्छ त्यस पछाडि इन्डिभिजुअलले गर्ने रिएक्सन अथवा उसले भोगिरहेको उसको आफ्नो दैनिक जीवनलाई हामी इन्ट्रोड्युस गऱ्यो भने त्यसले फेरि अर्को खालको डाइनेमिक्स फेरि निकाल्छ। त्यस कारण हामीले चाहिँ तीनवटा लेभलमा यसको पोलिटिक्सलाई हामीले स्टोरीको बेस भएर ग्राफिक नोभलमा प्रेजेन्ट गर्न खोजिरहेका छौँ। अब यसमा चाहिँ हाम्रो कन्टेन्ट चाहिँ अलिकति यो अहिलेको कन्टेन्ट भनेको प्रेजेन्ट प्र्याक्टिसलाई मात्रै नभएर एउटा रोड बन्नुको पछाडि यो कहिले प्लान भिजन भयो र यो कसरी एक्जिक्युट हुँदै अहिलेसम्म अहिले पनि कन्टिन्युसली बनिरहेछ यो कसरी बन्दो रहेछ भनेर भन्दाखेरि यसको थुप्रै ब्याक स्टोरिजहरू छन्। त्यस कारण चाहिँ हामीले केही कन्टेन्टहरूमा चाहिँ यो सुरुमा पञ्चायतकालमा निर्माण हुनको लागि एउटा सर्वे भयो अलाइनमेन्ट भयो तर त्यो अलाइनमेन्ट पछि चेन्ज भयो अब मल्टिपार्टी डेमोक्रेसी पछाडि होइन त्यो बेलामा पनि केही बजेट छुट्यायो तर बाटो चाहिँ बनेन। अब त्यस पछाडि फेरि 1990 पछाडि अलिकति लोकल लेभलमा कम्युनिटी युजर्स ग्रुपहरूबाट पनि बनाउनु भनेर भन्दाखेरि त्यो धेरैजसो लडाइँहरू चाहिँ अलाइनमेन्ट कताबाट जाने मेरो घर छोएर जानुपर्ने कि अथवा मेरो टोल छोएर जानुपर्ने कि त्यो कमनली अहिले पनि प्र्याक्टिस भइरहेछ होइन। त्यसमा चाहिँ प्ले गर्ने एक्टरहरू को हुन्छ होइन को साँच्चीकै मार्जिनलाइज हुन्छ कसले बेनिफिट लिन्छ त्यो चाहिँ अब होप र डिसएपोइन्टमेन्टको दोसाँधबाट अहिलेको सडक निर्माण चाहिँ चलिरहेको छ। त्यस कारण त्यसलाई चाहिँ स्टोरीमा ल्याउनको लागि जस्तो तपाईँको प्लानिङ भइसके पछाडि यो 1990 पछाडि चाहिँ फुड फर वर्कले फन्डेड गरेको त्यसमा चाहिँ लोकल लेबरहरू चाहिँ युज गर्ने भनेर भन्यो होइन त्यो चाहिँ लोकल इन्स्ट्रुमेन्टै युज गर्ने अनि त्यो गर्दै जाँदाखेरि चाहिँ त्यसको एजम्सन के थियो त भन्दाखेरि प्रायः जस्तो डोनर पोलिसिजहरूले फन्डिङ गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ अब त्यो सडक मात्रै बनाउने होइन लोकल लेभलको मान्छेले इम्प्लोइ पनि गराउने होइन इकोनोमिकल्ली उनीहरूलाई चाहिँ माथि उठाउने भन्ने थियो। तर त्यो बाटो खन्दै जाँदै यो कसरी फेलर हुने बिचमा प्रोजेक्ट कसरी रोक्यो भन्दाखेरि बिचमा भएको पोलिटिक्सलाई हामीले त्यसलाई चाहिँ जुन लोकल लेभलमा खेल्ने एक्टरहरूको आफ्नो आफ्नो बेनिफिट्सलाई चाहिँ आफ्नो पोल्टामा पार्दाखेरि यो कसरी फेलर पनि हुँदो रहेछ भन्ने कथाहरूलाई पनि जोड्दै जोड्दै र हामी चाहिँ कसरी यो पहिलाको हाम्रो एउटा आइडिया छ नि जस्तो प्रायः जसो पब्लिक वर्क भन्छौँ इन्फ्रास्ट्रक्चर बिल्डिङमा त्यो चाहिँ अब अनपेड लेबरको रूपमा भनेको यो दिस इज फर पब्लिक दिस इज नट फर पर्सनल बेनिफिट्स पब्लिक भएको हुनाले चाहिँ अब लेबर दिनुपर्छ भन्ने कथाबाट अहिले पर्टिकुलरली एकदम दोलखामा चाहिँ हाइड्रो पावर र त्योसँग जोडेको रोडमा चाहिँ कसरी लेबर मोबिलिटी छ त्यहाँको मात्रै त पुग्दैन देशको विभिन्न पार्ट अथवा विदेशबाट पनि जसरी लेबरहरूको फ्लो भइरहेछ त्यसले चाहिँ लोकल लेभलमा मान्छेहरूलाई कस्तो खालको होइन सेन्स भइरहेछ अथवा कस्तो खालको त्यसले चाहिँ उहाँहरूको दैनिक जीवनमा कस्तो खालको प्रभाव पारेको छ भन्दा हामीले अघि एउटा पिक्चर पनि देखायो कि जहाँ ठुलो पेनिस्टर भएको छ भन्दाखेरि मान्छे रोड आएपछि बेनिफिट हुन्छ भन्छ तर त्यस पछाडिका थुप्रै अरू कथाहरू चाहिँ त्यहाँ जोडेको छ जो चाहिँ हामीले एथनोग्राफिकली सबै डिटेलमा भन्न नसकिने रहेछ किनभने मैले यसैमा बेस भएर एमफिलको थेसिस पनि लेखेँ तर त्यहाँ मैले जुन खालको मेरो एथनोग्राफिक थिक डिस्क्रिप्सन भनेर मैले जति व्याख्या गरेको छु त्यसको जुन सेन्सरी मोमेन्टमहरू मोबिलिटीहरू होइन त्यो स्टोरीमा चाहिँ मैले त्यसरी प्रेजेन्ट गर्न सकिनँ र त्यसको आफ्नो लिमिटेसन छ। त्यस कारण यसलाई चाहिँ हामीले कसरी त्यो सेन्सलाई त्यो मोबिलिटीलाई हामीले कसरी प्रेजेन्ट गर्ने भनेर कन्टेन्टहरूमा गरेका छौँ र मैले यसमा चाहिँ हामीले अब हाइड्रो पावर डेभलपमेन्टसँग जोडेर ग्रिन रोड एप्रोच भर्सेस अहिले चाहिँ पछिल्लोचोटि चाहिँ डोजर डेभलपमेन्ट भनेर धेरै जस्तो पत्रिकामै प्रचार भइरहेछ तर त्यो कसरी डोजर ड्रिभन सडक निर्माण भइरहेछ र त्यसले कस्तो कन्सिक्वेन्स ल्याइरहेछ त्यो कथाहरूलाई पनि जोड्छौँ र मैले चाहिँ यो कन्टेन्टमा अब सबै कुरा भन्नुभन्दा मलाई एउटा चाहिँ इन्ट्रेस्टिङ स्टोरी चाहिँ यसको हाम्रो एउटा कन्टेन्टको एउटा स्टोरी बारे बताउन चाहन्छु। जस्तो म फिल्ड वर्कको बेला बर्सातको बेला चाहिँ तपाईँको म चरीकोटबाट सिङ्गटी जानुपर्ने त्यो ठाउँको नाम अनि त्यस पछाडि त्यहाँ जाँदाखेरि वर्षा भइरहेको थियो एक दुई दिन म चरीकोटमै होल्ड गरेँ त्यहाँ ल्यान्डस्लाइडहरू धेरै ठाउँ भएको हुनाले पछि चाहिँ फेरि म अब केही दिन पछाडि फेरि अब बर्सात बन्द भयो अनि म सिङ्गटी गएर बसेँ। सिङ्गटी भनेको एउटा एकदम भाइब्रेन्ट ठाउँ हो अहिले पछिल्लोचोटि अझ अर्थक्वेकसँग पनि यसको कथा जोडिन्छ अनि अहिले चाहिँ त्यो रिकन्स्ट्रक्सन मटेरियलहरू गाउँ गाउँमा ट्रान्सपोर्ट गर्नलाई एउटा जक्सन सेन्टर जस्तो पनि हो सिङ्गटी अनि एक दिन बिहानै के भयो भने बसहरू चाहिँ बिहानै झन् तपाईँको 4:30-5 बजेदेखि यस्तो हर्न लाएर तपाईँलाई सुत्न नदिने गरी बजाउँदै ल्याउँछ। त्यस दिन चाहिँ बिहान त्यो हर्नहरू खासै बजेन। अनि बिहान अब एज अ एथनोग्राफर म त एकचोटि घुमिराख्नुपर्ने भनेर गएँ। बस गाडीमा जाँदाखेरि चाहिँ त्यहाँ पहिरो आएर बसहरू सबै गएको छैन, त्यही भएर मान्छेहरू पनि त्यत्तिकै बसिरहेको, केही बसहरू त्यतिखेर अड्किरहेको छ। अनि म एकजना साथीको सपोर्ट लिएर म त्यो पहिरो गएको ठाउँ अलि चाहिँ 5-7 किलोमिटर चरीकोट साइडतिर थियो। त्यहाँ जाँदाखेरि चाहिँ एउटा इभेन्ट मैले अब्जर्भ गर्ने मौका पाएँ। अब पहिरोहरू ल्यान्डस्लाइडहरू त त्यहाँ थुप्रै ठाउँमा थियो र त्यसको कथाहरू पनि छ, तर त्यो ल्यान्डस्लाइडलाई किन फोकस गरेको भन्दाखेरि जस्तो म एज अ एथनोग्राफर मेरो फिल्ड नोट मैले कसरी लेखेँ भने त्यहाँ ल्यान्डस्लाइड भयो, एउटा त्यो गाउँको मान्छेको केही जमिन र घरलाई पनि जोखिम हुने गरी पहिरो खसिरहेको छ है, यो जेनरली प्रेजेन्टमा देखिने भ्यू होइन। त्यस पछाडि त्यो पहिरो गइसके पछाडि बाटो दुईतिरै गाडीहरू ओहोरदोहोर गर्ने गाडीहरू स्टक भइरहेछ। मान्छेहरूलाई यस्तो छ कि यो बाटो कति बेला खुल्छ भन्ने छ। त्यहाँ अरू अब कसले त्यो बाटोलाई खोल्ने भन्ने अथोरिटी कोसँग छ भन्दा त पर्टिकुलरली डिडिसी अथवा त्यो पर्टिकुलर अथोरिटी भएको बडीसँग छ। अनि मान्छेहरू त्यहाँ रिप्रेजेन्टेटिभ कोही छैन। अनि त्यो खोल्नको लागि चाहिँ डोजर चाहियो नि। डोजर ल्याउँदाखेरि एकातिर प्राइभेट डोजरहरू त छन् बाटोभरि, तर त्यो प्राइभेट डोजर भए पनि त्यो बाटो खोल्ने त अथोरिटी बडी नभएको कसले खन्ने। त्यस कारण त्यो 5-7 घन्टाको एउटा स्टोरी छ, जुन स्टोरीलाई मैले प्लेनली व्याख्या गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ एउटा महिलाले जसले आफ्नो खेतीपाती गुमाउनु परेको छ पहिरोको कारणले, उनले ढुङ्गा पल्टाएर डोजरलाई खन्न दिनु हैन। तर यतातिर के छ, प्यासेन्जरहरू प्याक भएर बसिरहेछ, कति बेला बाटो खुल्लाएर म मेरो डेस्टिनेसनमा जाउँला भनेर कुरिरहेको छ। भन्नुहोस् न, अब तपाईँको त्यहाँ कथा यस्तो छ कि देख्दाखेरि सिम्पल पहिरो गएको छ, एउटा महिलाले ढुङ्गा फाल्यो होइन, तर किन फाल्यो त्यसको ब्याकग्राउन्ड स्टोरिजहरू चाहिँ इन्ट्रेस्टिङ छ। त्यो चाहिँ कति डिस्क्रिप्सन गर्ने भन्दाखेरि कति त्यो भिजुअलाइजेसनले कति इफेक्टिभ हुन्छ भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ हामी त्यहाँबाट देख्न सकिन्छ जस्तो लाग्छ। जस्तो पहिरो गइरहेछ, एउटा महिलाले माथिबाट ढुङ्गा फालिरहेछ, यतातिर अरू मान्छेहरू पनि छन्, लोकल कन्सर्न मान्छे छन्, अनि उनीहरूले फोन लगाइरहेछन् कि अब गाउँपालिकाको पर्नु, अनि त्यस पछाडि त्यो सडक निर्माण गरेर कन्ट्र्याक्टरहरूलाई फोन गरिरहेछन्, डोजर आउन टाइम लाग्छ भन्छ। जब डोजर आउँछ कथा अर्कै मोड लिन्छ। एउटा महिलाले ढुङ्गा फाल्छन्, किन फाल्छन्, जेनरली त्यो सेन्स गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ किन फाल्यो होला होइन, किन भन्दाखेरि त्यसको पछाडि चाहिँ त्यो पहिलो नयाँ पहिरो भयो, त्यो अघिल्लो साल पनि त्यस्तै गएको थियो। त्यति बेलाको लोकल गभर्मेन्टले के सम्झौता गरेको थियो भन्दा त्यहाँ ग्याबिन वाल बनाउने र पहिरोलाई रोक्ने र उनको जग्गा उनको घरलाई जोखिमबाट बचाउनु थियो। तर कथा के पनि जोडिन्छ भने त्यो एउटा पार्ट भयो भने यतातिर यात्रु जो चाहिँ आफ्नो ट्राभल तयार गरेर बाटोमा आएर अड्किएका छन्, उनीहरूको इन्ट्रेस्ट के छ, कतिखेर यो बाटो खुल्लाएर म मेरो डेस्टिनेसनमा पुग्ला भन्ने एउटा तीव्र इच्छा छ। अर्कोतिर ती महिलाले यो पहिरो फेरि खन्यो भने चाहिँ मेरो घरबार गुन्छ। हेर्नुहोस् है, दुईवटा कस्तो कन्ट्रडिक्टरी भन्न त हामी बेनिफिट र अब डिसएपोइन्टमेन्टको कुरा गरिरहेछौँ। त्यहाँ गर्दाखेरि तपाईँको एक अर्का बिच चाहिँ तपाईँको सम्बन्धै छैन। यात्रुलाई आफ्नो बाटो जानु छ, ती महिलालाई केही पीडा पर्छ, खासै सरकार छैन, र ती महिलालाई ती यात्रु जहाँसुकै जाउँ तर मेरो आफ्नो घरबारी गुन्छ। त्यो कथालाई चाहिँ हामी कसरी प्रेजेन्ट गर्छौँ भन्दाखेरि मेरो प्लेन एथनोग्राफिक राइटिङले चाहिँ कति सेन्स गर्छ थाहा छैन, तर यसलाई चाहिँ हामीले त्यो जुन मोमेन्ट जसरी उनले प्रहार गर्यो होइन, त्यस पछाडि मान्छेहरूको त्यो लाइन, त्यो पहिरोबाट पनि कतिपय मान्छेहरू आँखा लिएर चाहिँ तपाईँको त्यो पहिरो हिँड्न खोज्दा अब हुन त नराम्रो भएन, तर त्यो पहिरो झरेको भए अझ के हुन्थ्यो, त्यो खालको सेन्स दिने खालको कुरा चाहिँ यो कन्टेन्ट च्याप्टरमा डिस्कस गर्छौँ भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ गरेको छु। स्टोरी चाहिँ यसरी नै अरू च्याप्टरहरूमा डिफरेन्ट गर्छ।
So we're open to any and all questions, whether it's about the art side or the content side. But if people are into it, we'd love your suggestions about themes or messages that you think should be in the book. For instance, in one chapter, before our intrepid travelers get stuck in the traffic jam that Shyam just described, the night before they're sitting in a hotel in Singati because they had to stay overnight. And the concept for that chapter is that these four characters start having a very political debate about roads and development in Nepal. So I'm starting to script that chapter, so I'd love your ideas about the things that people ought to say in that debate if you'd like to put them forward. And if you don't mind, I'll put my iPhone like in the middle, so because I want to be able to remember all your comments and stuff. And I understand Nepali if you don't speak super, super fast, but I have to answer in English because my comprehension and my speech ability are miles apart. So,